You're live.
Thank you. Call the Audit Committee to order. All members are present with the exception of Jim Cardillo. Approval of the agenda. Did everybody get, I know you did because Kim sent everybody a copy of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
one thing I didn't see was I thought we had said that we would discuss the nature of the reporting of the minutes at the next meeting. Are we not going to discuss?
Well, I figured we will get into that when we get into the approval of the minutes. But we can add that. The other thing that we don't have on here is the annual report. Kim, I didn't get back to you until very late. Does everybody else on the committee have the annual report for the audit committee?
Yes, she sent it this morning.
Okay, good. And there's Jim. So we are all here. So we need to add approval of or amendments to the audit report annual report for the audit committee to the agenda. So Katie, are you asking to add to the agenda, I guess, under old business discussion of the minutes?
Yes, please.
All right, so that is moved. So with those changes, adding discussion of the minutes and adding discussion of the annual report, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, the agenda has been moved, and all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Now on to meeting minutes. Kim, I didn't see meeting minutes for the last meeting, but that's probably because I'm still pretty disorganized. But we did have discussion of the minutes both at our group, but also with the Financial Advisory Commission. And I'm not sure that we have that resolved. We had a presentation at the Financial Advisory Commission from Hillary Raftovich explaining that the kind of minutes that the city uses is action minutes. Did I say that correctly? Does anybody, I think that's what it's called, which is very minimal. It includes there's Hillary. Hillary can explain it instead of me fumbling. Hillary, can you explain minutes to the committee, please?
So some background, that this past summer, we've been doing trainings for boards and commissions that you're all always invited to. But this one really focused on minutes training. And we did this a few months ago. It's a two-part thing. The new thing in minutes is making the document accessible to people who are using the website, who are using a reader to use the website, sight impaired individuals. So we changed the format of the minutes so that the reader can give them all the information that they need. So that was part one of the training, and part two is the style of minutes taking. The city, for many years, the policy has been to do action minutes. It's the way that city clerks are trained. Our city clerk is trained in action minutes. When I did my clerk's training, that's how I was trained. And action minutes reflect the attendance, the time that the meeting is called to order, the time that it's closed, as well as any actions that are voted on by the body and any topics discussed and who discussed those topics. So that's pretty much the limit of action minutes. What we avoid as much as possible is to have a minutes taker reflect the opinions stated by the individuals on the board, because that's where we get into trouble, where things are misstated. And even if the opinion is correct, if it wasn't stated in the meeting, but it is in the minutes, that can be problematic. So that was the background of all of this. So the preference of the city clerk's office is that minutes for all boards and commissions, because those are part of the official record of the city of Annapolis, be in the format of action minutes. Kim is working with the city clerk to try to find that balance of reflecting the things that you all want to see in the minutes, and at the same time staying within the bounds of the action minutes format. Trying to think what else that we discussed that you all need to. Oh, another thing is that it is available to you when you are in a meeting. If there's something that you want to say or that you're discussing, you can ask that that be reflected in the minutes. So if there's something that you think is really important, you can ask your minutes taker to please reflect in the minutes that I have stated blah, blah, blah. And the other thing that we can do is attachments. So on every boards and commissions webpage, there is a document section. So if there are presentations that you receive as a body, we are happy to add those to your page so that the public has access to that. And I can link that in the minutes. So the minutes can reflect a link to, a presentation was offered by, ABC auditors to the commission, or a presentation was offered by the Recs and Parks Department to the board. So if there's something that you guys are watching on PowerPoint during a meeting, I can always, I can show Kim how to put the link. I can post the document and Kim can put a link in her minutes that will reflect that. So those are ways that we can try to satisfy your needs to have information in there without going outside the bounds of action minutes. Ron,
So,
did you
just
have
a
a-
question?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Findell.
And that, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Rathbich, I would assume that goes for standing committees as well?
Yeah, so standing committees and the council, your minutes are taken through the Legistar system. So they are, by the nature of the system, already action minutes, because your minutes taker is putting in the actions as they are time stamped through your process.
But if we want, as you say, if we want to be quoted in the minutes, or if there's a presentation, we have to state that?
No, because it's sort of already there in your standing committee minutes. So the attachments are already there because the way the Legistar system works, those attachments have already been uploaded into the system and they're there as attachments. So that's it's already taken care of for council and committee meetings.
So if we want to be quoted, do we have to ask, I'd like to be quoted to, as I'm saying?
That is between you and the city clerk's office. I would say there is a stricter interpretation on council and committee meetings than, I think there's a little bit more flexibility for boards and commissions than the official record. And also quasi-judicial boards go in that same category with council committees and council meetings, because quasi-judicial boards are subject to being in court. And so we really try to keep any opinion statements out of there, because that could be, problematic.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Ms. George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hillary, I've heard conversations back and forth about this. The audit committee is not considered under the heading of boards and commissions, correct? What is our heading? Do we have a heading?
You are a board and commission. In the city code, you are listed as a board and commission.
Okay, thank you.
Sometimes gets thought of differently because you have aldermen on there, but technically you're a board or commission.
Okay, thank you.
Any Alderwoman Tierney?
Yeah, I just have to say, having sat through probably 2 or 3 of these autopsies of the minutes, I think we have to acknowledge that Kim is going above and beyond providing us with these minutes, and this is not a reflection of her at all. So I just appreciate her patience in sitting through as we go through this. So thanks.
And thank you for that. And Kim gets a double whammy because the Financial Advisory Commission is also going through the same kinds of deliberations. So I do have some comments, but before I say anything, are there other members of the committee that would like to speak? So I have been doing some analysis of this, and as it happens, I have a sister who takes minutes for the school for children with disability, which has very strong regulations. And it seems like there's 2 ends of a spectrum. One is action minutes, which are extremely minimalist, and on the other is a transcript, But in between, there are discussion minutes, and discussion minutes include much more of the meat of what transpired. I do think there is a difference between the city council committees and their meetings because they're largely driven, with some notable exceptions, but largely driven by legislation. And the legislation is introduced, the legislation is discussed, amendments are made, votes are taken, and so forth. The boards and commissions get into much more subjective, I believe, kinds of discussions, but nonetheless important and meaty. And so, in the fact, and Jim can correct me if I make any mistakes, in the fact, some of the things that were discussed, and it's similar to the question that Alderwoman Pendle Charles asked, if you specifically want something put on the record during the meeting, you can say, I would like this put on the record. And this has to have a fairly clear meaning of what you're referencing. And the other thing that we definitely would like to see, I believe, is any kinds of presentations or handouts. For example, Ms. George has a handout for today, which I don't know whether everybody has it. I have it, which is a mock-up of how we can look at risk adjustment. And I'd certainly like to get that as a part of the record. I asked that part of the record also include the one-page outline that was presented by, again, Ms. George on the 15th of November meeting, which is a pretty handy kind of reference to one of the topics for our agenda today, risk assessment. So I think that for me, the strict adherence to action minutes does not do a service to anyone who wants to go back and understand what transpired at the committee. On the other hand, I definitely agree we don't need a transcript, and we certainly don't want to be quoting statements of specific members, just the essence of what was discussed. I think that the avenue to get more robust minutes is we need to remember to say that we want this particular discussion put on the record and be specific. The other thing that came out of the meeting with the fact was we can do a on the record summary of the meeting at the end, and in there hit the highlights. It seems a little bit arduous to have put that onus on the committee, but on the other hand, it does get the committee the ability to emphasize things that they want to be on the record. There was a reference to going to the video since all of these things are recorded. But I remember at one of the meetings, and I don't know which one it was, the city attorney was a little bit antsy about that and said, well, the video is the record and it isn't the record. And I don't think we've gotten a clarification yet from him. But I can tell you, in trying to get up to speed on the audit committee, going back and looking through hours of your last year of audit committees is not an easy task. And I don't think that it's something that we should submit the public to. It does seem that they ought to be able to go to our minutes meeting by meeting and have a pretty good idea of what was discussed. Not a transcript, but at least some information about the meat of what was discussed. For example, today we're going to continue our discussion on risk assessment under old business. I think that we need to have some meat on those bones, not just say the audit committee discussed risk assessment again. So those are my thoughts. I've been trying to schedule a meeting with Hillary and Regina to go over for me, but I do think that the change was quite stark, and maybe that's because Kim did such a good job of very thorough and enlightening minutes. And so no good deed goes unpunished, Kim. But I do think that we need something that is a better memorialization of what the committee did. With that, do we have minutes and I just misplaced them for the last meeting? Oh, well, before I conclude that, what is the sense of the committee? How do you want to proceed? The fact sent the last two sets of minutes back to the administration and said, we'd really like to have more details entered into the minutes. I don't know where that is. I would point out that it was noted, and we do have to be always aware of this, that staff have other jobs besides taking minutes for the boards and commissions. And this is it's always busy in finance, as the director will tell us, but we're starting the budget process. So having a lot of bouncing back and forth is not ideal for the ideal use of staff time. And here's the city attorney, Mr. Lyles. Good morning. How are you?
Doing well, Mr. Chair. How are you?
Fine. You appeared, I think, to say something to us.
Fortunately, unfortunately, yeah, we have discussed it here at staff level with respect to those committees that had the issues, and it's our intent to definitely provide some more detail where my staff is involved with minutes, and but not a lot more detail, but some more detail, definitely. We heard you, and we're going to work on that. I don't supervise everybody that takes minutes, but we are interfacing with those staff that do, and it's our hope to be in one accord with respect to that. We do think there should be some more detail. The minutes that I saw from the last couple, I think it was one of the meetings, one committee, were not acceptable. So we should be doing several things with minutes, aligning them with the agenda, making sure that the votes are taken and shown in the minutes. And at least if there's a discussion on a topic, we'll mention that there is some discussion on the topic, but we won't talk about everything everybody said. Right. But mainly the minutes should show the progression of the committee through a particular idea or topic. If it ended up doing something, we'll show that. If it ended up doing nothing, we'll show that. And that's, the time that the meeting started and ended and those who attended.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for hearing the concerns of some of the committees. We do still have the minutes on the agenda to approve, but I want to take a second. Ms. George mentioned something that I've been thinking about quite a bit, and it is true that the Audit Committee is very much a hybrid committee. I am so used to, I legislate, though it's not my favorite system in the world, as Hillary can attest, but it makes it so much easier to have the agenda in electronic form and on your iPad or laptop, whatever you want to do it. And it's also easy to make notes in iLegislate, which I do a lot of as the meeting goes on. So when you want to go back and remember what was happening in environmental matters, for example, you have the agenda, you have the legislation, and you have any meeting notes that you took in addition to the action minutes that are provided by the staff. The reason that I was given, and as I remember, and I'm trying to remember, Rhonda, you were certainly there at the formation of the Audit Committee. The Audit Committee has older persons on it primarily because, as I remember it, the Audit Committee is eligible to get and spend city monies out of the city budget, and it has done so with some audits. It is not like FACT or the Annapolis Environment, which have no older persons on it. The Education Commission, on the other hand, does have older person chairing it and on it. And so we have some hybrid situations, but I want to have a chat with the city and with you all about us becoming more formally a standing committee or some kind of committee that goes into iLegislate. And Kim, I don't want to hear loud cheering from you. One of the benefits of that is then Takia would be our minute taker, just like Takia is the minute taker for all the rest of the committees, and that would relieve some staff burden. But that's a thought for another session, I believe, unless somebody wants to opine on it right now. Failing that, do we, oh, Jim, you have your hand up. It's hard seeing that.
That's okay. Thank you, sir. I just to reiterate and add to your comments earlier on the conduct of members in meetings to ensure that their items are reflected in the minutes. I think what was important, what we got out of last week's meeting, was educating committee members as to what to say and what to do in a meeting to ensure that the minutes capture the conscience of the committee. Was to indicate that any resolutions that the chair indicates as a resolution is reflected in the minutes. And if the chair say misses that the committee members themselves remind the chair that this is a resolution and this is a matter that comes to vote before the committee. So the important part, again, as Hillary stated also, is the education of committee members to say, okay, I would like this reflected, please. Let the meeting record reflect this. Please ensure that my comments become part of the record. Those kind of triggering introductory statements ensure that what you want is reflected in the minutes going forward.
Yes, thank you for that. You're correct. That was discussed at the fact. Ms. George.
Mr. Chair, in the spirit of moving us forward, could I just go out on a limb and move that we adopt the minutes from the last two meetings?
I would.
As they are written.
I'll
You may
second
make
that.
you may make that motion. I would resist it, but the motion is made and seconded, so it's time for discussion.
I guess since I offered the motion, my thinking is the staff is covered up, and those last two meetings, as I recall, as long as we have the attachments that you referenced earlier included in those minutes, I don't see anything is really gained from going back and having them revisit and rewrite and then submit them back to us, and then we consider them again. It seems like, what's done is done. Other than the attachments, I don't know that there was anything particularly substantive that would be missed in the minutes as they are currently written.
Thank you. Other members of the committee, any comments? Failing that, we have a motion with a second on the floor to accept the minutes of the last two meetings. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. I do want to make sure that the attachments, like, for example, the risk adjustment one-page outline is part of the minutes that we're accepting. But other than that, the minutes are approved. Gee, I hope we can go faster on the rest of the agenda. But so the next item on the agenda is in here. We're still working on the format of the agenda, but the next item on here is reports from subcommittees or members. I assume that's because from time to time the audit committee has subcommittees, and is it also the case or not the case that this would fit under new business or old business? Is there a reason for having this as a separate item on the agenda? Yes, Director Dickinson. Good morning.
Good morning. I just want to call to your attention that both Kim and Hillary have their hands raised.
Oh, okay. We're going to have a horn or something that accompanies that. Let's take Kim first, please. Kim, you're on mute.
Time is of the essence, and I appreciate the vote on the minutes. What I will say is I do not have the attachments or all the attachments that you referenced to for November. I don't think there was any in December. So those could be forwarded to my attention, that'd be great.
Okay, perhaps you and I can work on that and just make sure we have those items. But thank you for that. Hillary,
I go following along that because you did not amend the agenda to include those, but I can still post them on your page. So just anything you want posted, just send it to me and I'll post it.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
All right, no more hands. Please take your hands down. All right. Are there any reports from subcommittees or members before we move to old business? Bless you. All right, hearing none. Next item on the agenda is welcoming our new member, Caroline, who came to many meetings before she was actually on the committee and was very patient, but welcome aboard. Thank you for your volunteering to participate. And somebody please put the pepper away because Katie's sneezing. That now under, I don't know how we handle the annual report. I guess that's under new business. How did we amend the agenda? All right. So the next item under old business is continuation of our discussion of the risk assessment. We had a presentation at the last meeting discussing the elements of risk assessment. Ms. George, did you share this with this outline with everybody on the committee?
The template,
Yes.
I believe I sent it to you and I believe you sent it out to everyone.
Okay, so I guess the proper question is, does everyone have this template? And if the exercise for today is to add items in the template, let's take a second to make sure that the template is something that everybody finds useful. I take silence as usefulness. So.
And Mr. Chair, if I could
Certainly.
hold on, sorry. It's allergies. And I'm not even in Texas anymore. Sorry. Goodness sake. My thinking was that folks would use this template offline and come back to the meeting with their 3 to 7 items already included, rather than us going through it on our audit committee limited time, because it does take a little consideration. And it's really an individual process, not a group process. The group process comes when you evaluate what everybody's put together. So my suggestion is that each person take the template and use the time between now and the next meeting to add their items based on the headings on the template. And then when we hopefully have our actual performance of our risk assessment, we would use that as our input.
All right, so following that line of thought, has anyone filled out their template? And does anyone want to offer ideas as to some of those items at this point, or are we deferring that exercise till our next committee meeting? So to reiterate, my sense of what was just said is that it's incumbent on each of us, if we agree, and it seems like we have, to use this template, which by the way, I find very helpful. So thank you for that. In order to come up with the sense of each committee member of items that would be useful for a risk assessment. Caroline, do you have all of these things? I want to make sure you're up to speed. Do you have the template?
I do have the template. I'm looking at it. Of course, me being completely new to participating in city business, I have some ideas of what could be risks, but of course, there's a whole lot that I don't understand. So I hope you all are patient with me as I learn about the city and how it functions.
Well, I appreciate that. I suspect you're a little more up to speed than that, but I don't. don't know exactly how to proceed at this point, but I see Alderwoman Tierney has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. This is directed to Katie. Could I just have some, I guess, some guardrails on what compliance parameters we're looking at? Is that, yeah.
Well, typically, our city is constrained by requirements of state and the state and the federal level. And those would be things like OSHA or maybe some state regulation. So typically for us, the city, those are the those are the areas of compliance that we would be considering. And I guess I would also, this is a little outside of Ellie's question, but I would also, as you're trying to think what 3 to 7 items am I going to list, the one way I advise folks to think about it is, are there things that wake you up at 3 a.m. and you think, oh my gosh, what would we do if? It's those what ifs that you want to include on those 3 to 7 items, because those typically are, if you think they're high risk, and certainly this is directed to our council members, it's probably high risk. So that's what we want to try to capture. But we would like it done individually because everybody has a completely different, point of view and a different lens that they look at city operations and city government through. So that's the genesis of it.
Okay, thank you.
So if I could, yes, Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Director, Mr. Gerald. Mr. Gerald, do you find this to be helpful from your end?
Certainly, as we work through the risk assessment, it will be helpful. I'm trying to understand this first part, and I guess what role you want Director Dickinson and I to play in this, because we certainly have our areas of interest, and we would be glad to share those. So it's not sort of a mystery for you all trying to figure out what the areas should be. So we can do that, or we can just talk with you if you have questions individually as you're working through this. We'd be happy to help in that regard as well.
I like the former rather than the latter. That would be helpful to me.
I thought that might be the case.
Yeah,
So,
I'm leading you down the garden path.
with the committee's Director Dickinson, did you have your hand up?
I just wanted to clarify what it is. If somebody's asking us to do something, you want the staff to also fill that out.
Actually, I'm sorry. I guess my vision was that you would fill it out on behalf of the finance department.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to take an example before we move on in the agenda. The number one thing that I wanted to put on my list was the city transit system. And I think that it's at risk in several different ways. It's always been at risk in terms of having enough financing, but it is certainly of concern when one of our major revenue sources that subsidizes it, namely the Hillman Garage, is going to be down. I do believe there are plans in the city dock plan for taking care of that, but there are also other plans that are afoot, like expanding the circulator. The circulator runs on many parts of the same routes as the major system, but it runs for free. And so it's in direct competition with the transit system. And if we expand it, are we pulling more and more riders away from the main transit system? And then finally, there was an editorial in the Capitol a couple of Sundays ago where someone was urging that transit be free in the city. And I think there's a couple of problems there. We're already having problems getting enough money to finance the transit system, but also the federal grants are predicated on the fare box generating X% of the revenues for the transit system. So if we go to a free ridership system, do we lose our federal dollars, which is a huge chunk of the dollars that support the system? So I'm looking at transit as globally at risk, but from a number of different factors. And I see that Ms. George has her hand up, and I'm glad, because I was worrying that my risk item was too big and that we're going to say, no, just take the threat from the circulator or the threat from the ferry or whatever. So please, Ms. George.
I guess I would say we're the audit committee. We're not the finance committee. So we need to be keeping that in mind, because what ultimately we're using this risk assessment for, after it's all churned through, is we want to identify areas that might need to be audited. And so I think, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, the things that you're discussing, though they may be of great interest to not just us individually, but the city as an entity, they're not really auditable things. And we need to try to keep our focus on things that could ultimately be audited. Now, there may be some of that, what you discussed, may have an auditable aspect to it, but that's what you would need to hone in on.
Okay, Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, let me try to help. With that. Just could that concern be translated into financial, a specific financial risk vis-a-vis interfund transfers? I'm just trying to find a broad category for the chair's concern of reliance on one fund to support another. Help me with that.
Well, it
I'm
reminds
just
me
trying
of,
to generalize it instead of it being a platform for,
Right.
a specific concern.
so that was a friction in the past in terms of how all of those fund transfers were being accounted for, and there was disagreement in a past iteration of the city and city staff about where the transit funds were and how they were being accounted for and how the interfund transfers were being taken care of. I think that's really being fairly robustly accounted for under the systems that Director Dickinson has, but that would be an interesting one to think about, because there was a history in the past of that. But that's still, I'm still having this problem of Mr. Meat doesn't touch Mr. Potatoes here, that audit can't do anything that has to do with things financial.
No, Mr. Chair.
Well,
That's not
okay.
what I'm saying at all. Let me see if I can be a little more clear. Certainly, the three kinds of risks that we're considering are financial, operational, and compliance. So yes, certainly, any financial risk is something we want to consider. Perhaps to build on Alderwoman Tierney's concept, is maybe we look at what if, because remember, we're thinking about it in a what if sort of thing. What if we simply can't generate the revenue that we need to get federal funds once the Hillman garage is closed? Maybe it's just that simple statement. And then we look at, well, are there, the auditors then would come in, not us, we're just overseeing this process. The auditors would come in and do kind of a look-see to see, well, if not that money, then is there some other way to get money? So that's just a real kind of a snapshot view to your transportation issue. But absolutely, we look at financial risk. I mean, I would say ahead of operational and compliance risk, frankly. But we still have to keep in mind that we're the audit committee. and we don't step outside our scope.
So, in thinking about that, part of the thing that I've always worried about is that the circulator affects the viability of the main transit system. Is that operational? I mean, does the
That would be
circulator,
operational. That
so
would be
the
operational.
circulator could be driving the primary system out of business. So if I put on my list, evaluating the interrelationship, financial, operational for the circulator running it parallel to the main transit system, something I've always wanted us to take a step back and think about. That could be a risk analysis, a risk assessment.
That could be a risk element, yes.
Okay. Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think we'll go back to what Ms. George indicated. We want to preface any kind of risk with the what if statement. So, Mr. Chair, if you want to reiterate what you said and use the what if statement, that might be a little more clarity for everyone.
Okay, I can do that. Thank you for that question. What if by expanding the range and routes of the circulator, given that it's for free, we seriously impact the ridership of the primary transit system to a point where it is no longer financially viable?
Yep, that would work.
Okay. Now you know what to expect from me. All right. And of course, the same, I don't think it's nearly the same degree, but what if we're competing now with our land transit by water transit, to with the proposed ferry? So I think that's why I asked the question as an example, because I realize transit is too big a thing to tackle. And this kind of discussion helps me zero in on the kinds of things we would look at for a risk assessment. Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, maybe I'm confused now. How granular do you want us to be on this first pass, Katie? On the and I'm speaking, in respect to our new member, Caroline. We're drilling down to almost figuring out what the possible solution is in a way. So what the first part of my question, how specific?
Granular.
Yeah.
Right. I would leave that up to you. Everybody sees risk in a different way. So,
Okay.
and a lot of that is driven by how much knowledge you have about city operations.
Correct.
Obviously, our council members are going to have more of that information than the citizen members will. So for Caroline and myself, we might have kind of generalized what if statements, where the council members on our committee might have very granular statements. So, and we can work with both, because remember, we're going to aggregate everybody's lists. We're going to see if the same thing appears on several people's lists. Hopefully there'll be some unity there. And because we have to we're going to risk rank them. We're going to say, yes, this is highly likely to happen and very impactful. That would be the riskiest situation. And typically you want your audit dollars spent on your riskiest concerns. So that's why at this first pass, we want just give us those 3 a.m. what ifs. And it don't say, well, it probably isn't that important. If it's important to you, you think it's a risk, then it needs to go on your list.
So my second part is for Kim. So let the minutes state that we were given a template to fill out by our next meeting with some suggestions.
Right.
Okay.
Please.
Thanks.
And thank you for doing that, Alderman Tierney, because that was the next thing I was going to do with the permission of the committee. It seems like we're ready to complete this section of old business with an assignment that we each take the template and fill it in with 3 to 7 risk items. And now I think with this discussion, at least for me, we've got a focus that is, it needs to be a risk that involves matters financial, operational, or compliance, but it needs to be reasonably specific. It can't be the entire city's at risk, so we need to audit it. Although it's probably true. So with that, is the committee ready to move on to the next item of business? Seeing heads shake, I will say that we have completed old business, and we have not completed it. We've completed the work for today, and we have, this will be reappearing on our agenda for the next meeting. Let me take a second to ask you about the order on the agenda, because it almost feels like old business is really one of the more meaty things for today's meeting. I arbitrarily did old business, new business in the formatting of the agenda. Is that comfortable for everybody? Or, I mean, we can always come back and change it later on, but I just want to make sure. All right. All right. So with that, I think we're ready to move on to new business. There's an addition to new business that we'll get to, which is the annual report. But the first item under new business is a request for the quarterly performance measures. And I believe that I wasn't specific enough. I believe that was a request to review the performance measures for the first quarter. Is that correct, Jim?
Sorry, I had to go off mute. I was turned off. Okay. I believe I got to go back and look at some older minutes, but I believe that the process was the department heads were preparing their quarterly reports as to their performance, and they were submitting them to the city manager and I believe the city council. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And then our task was to ensure that these were being adhered to and there was adequate follow-up. So it was an oversight role with regards to the city performance measures that we could see as an oversight committee, that we could see that number one, progress was being made, issues that were not addressed are being addressed, et cetera. So
Okay.
that's my distillation of a couple of meetings where performance measures were discussed.
Thank you for that. I will turn to my two colleagues on the council. I don't recall seeing quarterly performance measure updates. And Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gerald, was that your understanding? Because I'll be honest, and I'm sure Mr. Cardella is correct. I'm just want to kind of get your understanding since you're the director of the departments.
Yeah, that's correct. And right now we're collecting the quarterly report for the second quarter, the end of December. Each of the reports will have the year-to-date performance numbers. So this report that we will forward to the council and to you all when it's completed, will have the year-to-date. So each month it's broken out monthly with the measures for each of the performance standards, and so that is being collected right now, as we speak. I've already gotten several of them, and they're due by the end of the month, so we'll have those. And I'll also say that all of the performance measures have been updated based on the working with Forest Consulting. Forest Consulting, they were great. So they help the departments a lot to improve the performance measures. So those have all been updated, and that's what we're measuring for this fiscal year. So when we submit that report to you and to the council, it will reflect those new performance measures.
Thank you.
Ms. George. Ms. George. And then I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. David, two questions for you. First of all, the reporting, does it not just show the individual months, but what the year-end goal is, so we could see percentage?
It does, yeah. So it shows
Okay.
year to date, right? I think that's what you're asking, year to date.
Well, no, what the end goal was for the year, like if it's a unit of measure, you know,
It
where they,
does.
okay, that's that question. And then the second question is, do we have, I mean, we haven't seen it, the first quarter's report?
I will check to see if that was,
That, I mean, I was thinking we would already have that.
yeah, you should. So I'll check and make sure that was forwarded.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, that was also my question, because I actually am looking forward to seeing the new form, given the contractor's work. And I think the sense that I'm taking, and I'll let you speak for yourself, Jim, is that we wanted to see the new reports and see how it was working. And that's why I think the request was for the first quarter of audit of performance measures. So I take it, City Manager Gerald, that's something that we'll get between now and our next meeting. The committee members will get.
I would expect that, yeah. Yeah, because they're due from the departments this week, and then we'll compile them all. And
Well,
send
that's
them
the
out.
second quarter. The first quarter is already in place. Do we already have the first quarter reports?
That's what I'm going to check on, yeah, to see
Okay.
if that was
All right.
provided.
All right. Ms. George, you had your hand up?
Oh, you answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. So the status of this new business is I'm not sure whether we're getting just the latest or we're getting the ones for the first quarter. Frankly, I'd like to see both, but I'll take the ones from the first quarter just to see something. But those are going to be provided to us forthwith, and we'll take them up as old business at our next audit committee meeting. Is there any other discussion or work to do on this part of new business? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, who?
It's-
Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're able to answer this at this point, but I think I need a flow chart. Where will we be with performance measures in April, when the respective departments are reporting to the Finance Committee?
So the new performance measures are in place.
Okay,
So those will be included in the budget. And by April, we will have gone through 3/4 of the fiscal year. So we can report the first 3/4 of the fiscal year through March.
okay. And the Audit Committee will be ahead of that. We'll have reviewed them.
Correct. We will provide those, yeah. So they're through the end of March, so then we compile them and provide them, just like we are in January for the performance measures through December. So there'll be some lag because that quarter will end in March, and then we'll put them together in April.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you might need an assistant.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I think that should give you some urgency to fill a vacancy. All right. Is the committee ready to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is meeting dates and times for this coming year, which I believe actually Kim already took care of that and sent us out invites. So I just want to make sure that everyone is up to date. Everyone knows what those dates are. If there's anything else, yes, Ms. George.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I have a question about our meeting times. We have 3 citizen members and we all have day jobs. And I'm just wondering if it might be the mood of the committee in its entirety to switch from 8 a.m. to an evening time. I mean, I can make this work, but it certainly would be a lot easier if I could do evening.
I want the record to show that I did not pay Miss George to make that request, but I'm in full support. I'm a big fan of evening meetings. I know it's an imposition on the staff, and I do have a question in that regard, but it's also much more accessible to any citizen who wants to view it, and particularly since we're doing it virtually. But Alderwoman Pindle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the sense in the beginning of the morning meetings was because people who generally are business owners, of course, are better situated to come in the morning rather than the evening or during the day. So that was my understanding of the early morning meeting for folks who may have had a business that they had to start. I know that's how the business leadership monthly meetings go. They're at 8:30. I'm no big fan of early morning meetings. But I mean, I've weathered the storm here, barely at times, but it's, but I guess I'm a creature of no change, so I've gotten accustomed to it, but the will of the body is fine with me. I'll do whatever.
So the rub has always been for evening meetings that it requires, any meeting that requires staff participation, it's another evening of their long workday already. But that also raises the question, and I almost hesitate to go here, but I do think that not on this agenda was a report from the finance director. I don't know whether that was something that the audit committee traditionally got, but I know sitting on many other committees, the finance director spends a lot of time giving committees reports and updates. Same thing for the city manager. And so the one rub about evening times is, first of all, it's hard to find an evening that doesn't have meetings already scheduled. But secondly, it's one more evening where staff have a very long day. So I would certainly open the floor for discussion. We have 4 staff members in attendance at this meeting, and certainly would welcome input from them. Okay, everyone loves it. No, Mr. Lyles.
Yeah, I will just say that because of my staff's willingness to be available to all committees, boards, and commissions, we made the decision early on to try to be available for boards, committees, and commissions, something that was not done before. But that is a strain on us in the evenings. And I've had to ask my staff to not go to these meetings because I'm finding that I have no lawyers and no other staff people working during the day, because I have to let them off because I can't pay them overtime. They have to get comp time or some kind of other situation. And if they've got childcare issues. And so it's like every evening. And then boards and commissions that supposed to meet once a month are now trying to meet twice and 3 times a month just because they're on Zoom. So it doesn't make it easier on us when we have Zoom, right? Because people, committees and commissions and boards want to meet all the time. And so it's a strain on our very, very small staff. And, you know, what we will do is we have started telling boards and commissions and committees that we will attend if we're on the agenda if you need us. But it is already a strain on a very small staff. And because we have to be here from 8:30 to 4:30. After that, you know, I've got to make sure that people have time to get home and to be home. And if they're going to be by Zoom, they've got to leave the office, many of them, because they have childcare issues and things like that. So it's been a strain.
Any other comments? Yeah, City Manager Gerald.
Yeah, and obviously that goes for the rest of the staff as well. I mean, we always would prefer to have it there during the hours 8:30 to 4:30. That's the ideal for us. We understand that is not always possible, but that is what works out best for the staff. And, you know, we've got Kim on this call, and obviously Jody and I are here during those key hours during the day as well. But I'm not sure that that's your primary consideration when deciding. It's really more the members of the committee that matter the most. But our strongest preference would be 8:30 to 4:30.
Yes, Director Dickinson.
Yeah, that's my sentiment is it's up to the committee. You're not going to find a consensus. Kim is a morning person. She starts early, so this probably is an easier time for her. But for me, I'm not. So, but evening isn't any easier. So I'm indifferent, and I think Kim would prefer morning, but that wouldn't be what should guide your decision is what's easiest for you.
So may I ask you a direct question, Director Dickinson? And this is really out of curiosity. Why are you here at this meeting?
Why am I at the audit committee meeting?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not displeased.
No, I mean,
in any way, but
I was told that the finance office has to be here in attendance, and that we also staff the meetings with somebody to take minutes. And I can't remember if that's written in code.
In the code.
Or
Code
what, it may
requires,
be written in the
code requires a
so-
report from finance.
okay. So that's something that got dropped off of the agenda, and we'll have to get it back on. But I have been watching over time the demands on staff. I think it's also it's acute on a lot of staff, but it's particularly acute for planning and zoning that has all kinds of quasi judicial, which are heavy duty, long meetings with everybody having to be on their toes the whole time. So I think we need to find a balance so that we don't burn staff down. But on the other hand, I thought this was a question I had on my mind. I figured I would wait till I was on the committee a bit longer before I asked about our meeting time, but it has now come up. So let me ask Jim and Caroline, because you also are people who work as this meeting time. It's once a month. It comes with the turf, so to speak, but do you have any thoughts on this meeting time?
My
Yeah.
preference, honestly, is I don't mind the mornings. I do have several meetings in the evenings based on my job and the other organizations that I volunteer for. So I find that whatever I don't get done during the day spills into the evening anyway. So it is kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but I'm not opposed to an early start.
Okay, so we have a motion to start the meetings at 6 o'clock or 6 a.m. Jim, you were going to say something?
For me, I do prefer the 8 a.m. time. I know it's once a month. This allows me to carve out a morning, provided we can, move on to other items by 9:30 or
Yeah.
so. But yeah, the mornings are easier for me. Unlike members of the city council, I do 8 a.m. So
Right. Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, this is just directed to the city attorney, just as a data point. When does overtime kick in? What are the overtime parameters?
Well, if we had overtime money,
Yeah.
It would probably kick in at 4:30.
Dig.
4:31, or prior to 8:30. This meeting starts at 8. I mean, I'm very comfortable shifting my staff's time. I'll let them come in a few hours late the next day. I generally don't like to take it into the next pay period. The reason I bring that up is because we have so many meetings, it's hard to keep track of when my staff's coming and going, because I can't. Generally, the salaried folks, they have to work whenever they have to work. but I do like to give them some accommodation, if they want to come in late after working an hour or two late in the previous night.
Okay, thank you. I think that should be considered.
So let me put out a test statement. It's my sense that while an evening meeting has some appeal, the overwhelming sense of all of the people who participate is that we leave this meeting at 8 o'clock. Is that do I have a nod of heads by committee members? All right, so the motion or the action out of this is a motion to approve the meeting dates and times for this coming year. Is there such a motion, please?
So moved.
moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, so nice try, Katie, and I agree with you, but
Oh, well,
yes, all right. So I see I did get the annual report on the agenda. I thought I'd forgotten it. So next item of new business is the annual report. I want to say that I want to thank Kim. This was a very thorough annual report, more robust than many that I've seen, and certainly I think quite adequate to satisfy the requirements for an annual report. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Yes, Ms. George.
this is very minor and I'm good either way, but could we please change the wording of, what do we call it? Citizen volunteer citizens, or what's that phrase that we use to describe the non-council members on the committee? It's an odd choice of words.
We call them non-council members.
No.
Probably.
Impressed seaman.
Yeah. No, what is that wording, Jim?
Well,
I believe in the charter, the charter amendment refers to them as citizen members.
Citizen members, yes, as
Right.
opposed
Citizen
to
members.
whatever we're using in.
If I go back to the charter, the enabling legislation, I believe it said citizen member. The committee shall be comprised of 3 council members, 3 citizen members, and a representative from the Financial Advisory Commission.
Yes, rather than volunteer.
Right.
Civilians, that's it. That was the word, volunteers.
Right.
Yeah, I believe it says citizen members. I'll go back to, I don't have access to the legislation right in front of me. It's on the website. It's on the FAC website page as
No,
well.
I'm sure that's your.
So is
I
that
guess my motion is,
yes, thank
I
you.
move that we adopt the annual report with the change of wording to reflect what is in the code, which is, say it again,
Citizen.
Tim. Citizen members.
Citizen members.
Citizen members.
Citizen members.
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Is there a motion with that amendment to accept with our thanks the annual report? I need a motion.
Oh, so moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. I left on here because it was part of the generic template, but typically, do we have a citizen group presentation before the audit committee? So I would, in terms of cleaning up, I would take off of future agendas item number 5 and number 8, but add back report from the finance director.
Yes, please.
But I see Jody had been taken back. Did you do a report like you do for the fact, Jody?
So my reports are very easy. I just kind of make notes as to what we're doing in finance. So it doesn't require a lot of preparation, but you were talking about points on here that I'm not sure that they align with the agenda that I have in front of me. Did you say 5? You want to take out reports? My 5 is reports from subcommittees.
Right. My sense was that those reports are subsumed under either old business or new business, but that's my
Okay.
sense.
And then you said something about citizen
Citizen-
reports, and I don't see that on mine.
Oh, it's number 8 on my agenda.
Okay,
Mm-mm.
my agenda says adjournment at number 8. I'm not sure.
And mine does
Okay.
too.
I'm looking at the wrong one, or you have.
No,
an
you
older
might
one?
be looking at a
You're
more
right.
up-to-date one.
Okay.
Yes,
Because that was taken off of whatever this is.
good. All right,
Okay.
all right. Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As my recollection is about reports from subcommittees, and I don't remember what the issue was, maybe Alderwoman Tierney was there. There was a subcommittee where Alderman Payon and Mr. Kirschner and maybe one other person were, or Mr. Cardella might remember as well, where there was some sort of subcommittee that they formed, a working group. And I don't remember what the issue was, but that's my recollection. And maybe that's the genesis of number 5. Mr. Cardillo or Alderwoman Tierney, does that ring
Yeah,
a bell?
I do remember on performance measures review, we formed a committee. I'm sorry, I think Katie had her hand up before me. Probably.
Just say that very thing. That was the subcommittee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I
But
didn't
would-
recall if you were on that committee, Ms. George, but okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cardillo, Jim?
Mr. Chair, if you do form an ad hoc subcommittee, I would leave that in the agenda. I would leave that as a memory jogger for you to ensure that if there is a current ad hoc subcommittee, such as that reviewing the risk assessment profile, or another subcommittee, because one issue is we're going to have to go through the selection of an external auditor. So that's another subcommittee activity. So just to keep that for you as the chair in order to move things along on the agenda.
Okay, I accept that, but then should there not be a subsetting of that item number 5? And I'm still confused how it differs from either new business or old business. So under number 5, instead of saying just reports from subcommittees or members, which seems pretty open and generic, would it be report from the external auditor selection committee?
Yes, because subcommittee activity could involve both new and old business. The subcommittee report would be a separate agenda item.
Okay. Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it's important enough to require its own heading based on,
Okay,
especially
fine.
what Mr. Cardella just said.
Question asked and answered. Thank you. With that, unless there's other comments for the good of the order, I believe we've completed the agenda. Alderwoman Tierney.
Well, just for clarity, are there any active subcommittees right now? I mean, is there a committee on performance measures, or because I know that was discussed? No, okay.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Ms. Dickinson.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I'm drafting an RFP for the audit services, and I should have it done in the next couple of weeks. And I may send it out to the committee for your review, and it may be that you should approve it at your next meeting, review and approve it. Because it is you're the one who's hiring the auditor, so you should probably see the RFP and give me feedback. So as I finish that, I'll get that out to the committee, and hopefully we can approve that the next meeting and then get it on the street right after that.
Okay, so that would be for our next meeting, an item that would go under
Correct.
item number 5.
That's up to you, but I just needed to get it on the agenda somewhere to look at that and approve it.
It's not a subcommittee or a member for that matter. So that would just go under new business.
Or that could be report from the finance director.
Okay.
And
All right.
let the minutes reflect.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't have that on this agenda. Is there a brief report from the finance director?
Okay, I'll just go through what we've been working on in the office. As you know, we're finalizing our annual financial report from 21. I had gotten an extension to January 31, and we've been working with the auditors. We're almost done with our changes and our updates of the document, but the auditors are not going to be able to push it through their process by the end of January. So they want me to extend into February, and we're going to have a progress meeting on that later this week about a date that we can extend it to. I think it's almost there. The audit person that was doing most of the work had to be out sick in December, unfortunately. So we lost a lot of time there, and then he's been pulled to another job. So that's one of the things that Julie and I are working on, and it's moving along, and she's been a great help with that process. As you know, the departments are working on their budgets. They're supposed to have those into the system soon. We're having them put them both into Munis as a budget item and in the budget module and into OpenGov. And Katie wants to move to use OpenGov for that purpose. And so she did a training this year, show them how to get it in there. And then she's going to compare and see how it works when they try to get their budgets into OpenGov. So we're going to be moving and preparing the budget in OpenGov in the future. And we start the meetings with the departments in February. Katie and I and the city manager will be meeting with the departments individually. I'm involved with the union negotiations, and that I have to prepare a lot of economic analysis. So I'm working on that. I already talked about the RFP. We're working on the final concession agreement for AMRP in the Hillman Garage. So that's coming to a head now, and that's been taking a bit of time because it's crunch time now. It's getting the concession agreement settled. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but we have implemented a software product called Debt Book, and it helps us monitor our debt payments when they're due, etc. And it's also, they're going to help us implement a new lease standard that GASB has required, that we do something different with leases this year. It's very complicated, and they're going to do a lot of the legwork for us in implementing their lease product, their lease module on that software product. I have, staffing openings now. I have the procurement officer that's still open. We've got to get that filled. Brian has graciously agreed to stay on at the latest to the beginning of the summer. But we're still taking applications, and it's going to be open until it's filled. We had a candidate, but she did not accept our offer. So we relisted it, and we're still trying to get a good candidate in. We have a temporary serving in an AP position right now, because when we went out to advertise for that, we couldn't find a good candidate that would accept an offer at what we could offer salary wise. We have an opening in an accountant position for our grants accountant. She gave us her notice in December and stayed a month, and so she's no longer here. We're filling that. And then Katie is advertised for a contractual budget analyst to help her through the budget process, to hopefully get some of that detail work done. We're going to have to look at the candidates and see who applies, because it's a bit of an unusual position. So we're hoping to fill that. But anyways, so I got those 4 openings that we're dealing with right now.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, just briefly, Jody, when you mentioned lease, is that for city property?
So the GASB had a new statement that the way that we show leases currently, they didn't think it was fairly presenting all the agreements that businesses have out there for software, et cetera. So they've changed the way they categorize leases. A lot of the smaller software type, even equipment lease, they're all going to be considered, everything's going to be considered a lease. And it changes the way we account for them, and it changes the way we present them in the financial statements. It's requires analyzing in detail the terms of each agreement, which is one of the services that this debt book staff is going to do. They're going to comb through the leases and look at the provisions and see which ones qualify to be a lease. And it's difficult. I'm one who's not really in favor of it, but I don't have a choice. When Gatsby says you have to account for something in a certain way, that's what you got to do. So it's a
Yeah.
big standard to try to implement, and I'm glad we found a product that will help us and staff there that will help us do the review.
So they'll be able to be identified in budget review. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
can do it now. This will make it easier. This will be like a database of all those agreements, so it will serve that purpose as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, is there any other business before the committee? Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to re-welcome Ms. Ewing to our group, and hopefully this has been productive for her. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I look forward to learning and growing and hopefully contributing to this organization. You have a lot on your plate. There's a lot going on in the city.
Our plate.
Yes, our plate. Yes.
Okay.
I just became a member, so just get
Feel free to ask us questions
Thank you.
offline.
Just don't expect an answer.
True.
All right, just for the record, I would like to include in the minutes the template that was given to us by Ms. George for use for the Audit Committee risk issues analysis. Before the next meeting, let's say within the next 2 weeks, if everybody could submit their items to fill out this template, that we could then circulate it to everyone else on the committees to expedite that discussion, if that's okay with the committee. All right, hearing that, I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.